Hello friends, welcome back to another episode of Commander Dive. Today we're looking at a Dimir commander, looking at a lot of the Duskmourn cards that have Manifest Dread, because this is a Manifest, Ninja, and Recursion deck. Can you guess who it is? Oh, so close. No, this is Satoru, the Infiltrator. Let's get into it. I'm Adam. This is Commander Dive. Satoru the Infiltrator. This is a blue-black commander, so it's only 2 CMC. I love low-cost commanders because you can play them multiple times without having to pay a ton of tax. This is a human ninja rogue. It's a 2/3 menace, and it says when this and or one or more other non-token creatures enter the battlefield under your control, if none of them were cast or no mana was spent to cast them, draw a card. So this is a draw engine in the command zone. So how are we going to get these triggers? Well, we're going to use the Manifest Dread mechanic from Duskmourn. We're going to use the old Manifest. We're going to use Cloak. We're going to use Plot. We're going to use Ninjitsu. And we're going to use Recursion. So all of these either create a creature that are non-token creatures, Manifest Dread, or it is going to bring a creature onto the battlefield without having to pay the cost. So every time we do that, we're going to draw a card. So really cool way to take advantage of some of the new Duskmourn cards. Let's get into exactly what this is. The first category we're going to talk about is free creatures. The first card here is They Came from the Pipes. It's 4 and a blue for an enchantment that says when they came from the pipes, enters Manifest Dread twice. To Manifest Dread, you look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one on the battlefield face down as a 2/2 creature, and the other into your graveyard. Turn it face up anytime for its mana cost if it's a creature card. This also says whenever a face down creature you control enters, draw a card. So if Satoru is on the battlefield and you play this card, this is going to come in. You're going to then Manifest Dread twice. That's 2 single instances of Manifest Dread. So you're going to draw for each one of those. Then because 2 face down creatures entered, you're going to draw 2 more cards. So it's a total of 4 cards and 2 creatures. This is crazy value for this deck. Next up, we have Innocuous Rat. This is 1 and a black, and when it dies, you Manifest Dread. It's just a 1/1. This is just a great early creature, and if you have something like Virtue of Persistence, which is in this deck, you can continually recur it if you just need to do some manifesting. A great recursion target just to get some different stuff out onto the board. Now we have an all-star in this deck. This is Cryptic Coat. It's 2 and a blue, and when it enters, you cloak the top card of your library, then attach Cryptic Coat to it. So Cloak is very similar to Manifest, except that it also has Ward 2, which makes it even better. The equipped creature gets +1/+0 and can't be blocked. And then you can pay 1 and a blue to return Cryptic Coat to its owner's hand. So what you can do is actually play this card. You manifest the top card, cloak the top card, and then you can return this to your hand and do it again. So this allows us to continually cloak the top of our deck to get out what we need to. It's going to give us lots of card draw, and that's why this is kind of an all-star in this deck. Next up, we have Etrata Deadly Fugitive. This is 1 blue-black for Vampire Assassin. It says Death Touch. Face down creatures you control have 2 blue-black. Turn this creature face up. If you can't, exile it. Then you may cast the exile card without paying its mana cost. And then it says whenever an assassin you control deals combat damage to an opponent, cloak the top card of that player's library. This is another Karlov Manor card, and this is actually the alternative commander for this deck. If you wanted to switch things up, you could actually run this. If you wanted to turn this into an Etrata deck, you could just take out all of your ninjas and replace them with assassins and just kind of lean more into the manifest side of it. This also allows us, even if you're not playing it as the commander, having it in the 99. Basically, if Satoru gets killed too many times and the commander tax gets to be too expensive, you can always drop this and you have a whole nother strategy and a whole nother way to win the game. You can get some of those big bruisers we have in this deck flipped over for just the 4 cost instead of the mana cost. All right, now we have Orochi Soul Reaver. This is 5 and a black, or Ninjitsu, 3 and a black, so you're going to get 1 trigger there. Whenever 1 or more creatures you control deals combat damage to a player, create a treasure token, so a little bit of ramp. And then you manifest the top card of that player's library, another card draw, and another creature. This is crazy value and works in this deck in so many ways. It was almost like it was made for this deck. Awesome card. Next up, we have Visage Bandit. This is 3 in a blue. I love this card, very underrated. You can have it enter the battlefield as a copy of a creature you control, except it's a shapeshifter rogue in addition to its other types. You can plot it for 2 in a blue. And what's plot? Well, you pay the 2 in the blue, you exile this card, and then on a future turn, you can play it for free. So we have lots of these payoffs that aren't legendary. So you could have it flip over and you have this big beater, and then you play Visage Bandit for free. You get a copy of it, and also, you're going to get a card draw because you're playing it for free. So we'll look at those beaters here in a second, because that is the end of this category. Now we're going to look at payoffs. All right, I'm going to start this category out by saying this is kind of a salty deck. And when you're dealing with salty cards, there is a key to that, and we'll get to it as we get to the end of this card. And the first one here is Rotten Mouth Viper. So this is 5 in a black for an elemental snake, 6/6. As an additional cost to cast this spell, you may sacrifice any number of non-land permanents. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each permanent sacrificed this way. So you can actually cast this from your hand by sacrificing different things on your board. So if you had to, you could play this from your hand. Really, this is a recursion target. It says whenever a Rotten Mouth Viper enters or attacks, put a blight counter on it. For each blight counter on it, each opponent loses 4 life unless they sacrifice a non-land permanent or discard a card. So here is the key. This gives your opponents choices. Some opponents are going to want to take just 4 life, some are going to want to discard a card, and some are going to want to sacrifice a non-land permanent. So depending on the opponent, they're going to choose the least salty choice for them. I like this, all 4 are salty, but someone's like, oh, I have extra life, I have 4 to lose. Another opponent could be like, man, I have tons of stuff on my board, I can actually sacrifice something. So this is a way to put a salty card in that everyone is not going to hate you instantly for playing it. I mean, once it starts racking up those blight counters, yeah, but in general, this is going to be less salty than a lot of other cards because of the idea that it gives you choices. So just remember, if you're playing a lot of salty cards, and you're not giving your opponents choices, they're not going to have a good time. They're not going to want to play with you, and you literally could lose friends. I'm not joking. This really can happen. It's very important that you're careful about how much salt and the kinds of salty cards you put in your deck. I think this is a good example of a salty card that is just perfectly designed. It lets you do what you want to do and also gives your opponents some choices. And so Rotten Mouth Viper. Next up, we have Abhorrent Oculus. This is 2 in a blue, very famous card right now from Duskmourn. 5/5 for an eye. As an additional cost to cast this spell, exile 6 cards from your graveyard. Flying. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, Manifest Dread. Love this for this deck. This works so well. The idea is you would actually manifest this, and then you just flip it over for the 3, and because you're not casting it, you're just flipping it over. You don't have to exile the cards. Same thing if you're recurring it from your graveyard. You're not going to have to exile the cards. However, we have enough manifests and different things in here and discard, and we'll get to that here in a bit. But that you could actually play this from your hand pretty easily if you just wanted to exile 6 things. So next up, we have Valgavoth, Terror Eater. So I've done a full commander dive on this. It's a demon deck. Really cool deck. This is 9 mana with 3 black pips, really tough to get out if you're playing it from your hand. This is a recursion target. It's a 9/9 Elder Demon, flying lifelink. It's got ward, sacrifice 3 non-land permanents. Again, 3, that's a tough ward, and that is pretty salty, but it is possible to do, and it gives them the option, since it's non-land permanents, not necessarily creatures. They can sacrifice, treasures and different things. Not to say that that still isn't salty, but I like the flexibility there that it's non-land permanents. In Commander, this is not going to be too terrible to do. The rest of the card reads, if a card you didn't control would be put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. During your turn, you may play cards exile with Valgavoth. If you cast a spell this way, pay life equal to its mana value rather than pay its mana cost. Just awesome ability. You can just run away with a game if you play this guy, and very difficult to remove. Really, just a great card. Next up, we have Demon of Catastrophes. This is 2 and 2 black for a 6/6. So an overstated creature with flying and trample. As an additional cost to cast this creature spell, sacrifice a creature. Well, guess what? We're flipping it over. We're not casting it. You don't have to sacrifice the creature. This is just an awesome way to get out a big beater. Next up, we have the same thing. It's Morkrut Behemoth, 4 and a black. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature or pay 1 and a black. It's got menace and it's a 7/6. So basically, we're going to flip this over for 5, and you get a 7/6 with menace. Really good. It's only a common, but the fact that we can get around that additional cost is going to make this really valuable in this deck. All right, now we have a pretty popular card. This is Thieving Amalgam, 5 and 2 blacks for an Ape Snake, great creature type. It's a 6/7. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, you manifest the top card of that player's library. With Satoru, you're going to draw a card on top of it. So really awesome ability. Whenever a creature you control but don't own dies, its owner loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Just an all-around great card for this deck. Enough said. That closes out that category. Let's talk about discard. Okay, so now we are going to talk about a category all about making everybody discard 1 or 2 cards. This is one of those things where for this particular category, the cards that I chose either target everybody. So not only are they having to discard, but you're having to discard. Granted, it benefits you to discard because you're going to get stuff in your hand that you probably don't want there, some recursion targets. So this allows us to get that stuff out of our hands. But also, in addition to that, most of these cards allow our opponents to draw as well. So it kind of lightens that hit a little bit for them. And, it's going to make it so, like I said, they don't resent you. It's a salty card without, being too punishing. So the first card here is Liliana of the Veil. This is 1 and 2 blacks. It's got 3 loyalty. It's a planeswalker. Each player discards a card is the +1. Your -2 is target player sacrifices a creature, and your -6 is separate all permanent target player controls into 2 piles. That player sacrifices all permanents in the pile of their choice. This is a salty planeswalker, but at least it says each player, so it includes you, so you're going to discard a card. It's got removal, but it can only be used once, and it's really hard to get to that 6. So if you do get to that 6, then players only have themselves to blame. Just a great, well-designed card overall. All right, now we have Vohar, Vodalian Desecrator for blue-black. It's a Phyrexian Merfolk Wizard. It's a 1/2. It says tap this, draw a card, then discard a card. So this allows us to rummage our hand. If you discard an instant or sorcery card this way, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Probably not going to be discarding a whole lot of instants and sorceries. This is just a rummage ability on a stick. You can then pay to sack this, and you can cast a target instant or sorcery from your graveyard this turn. If that spell would be put into your graveyard, exile it instead. Activate only as a sorcery. This is really great because we probably are going to end up with some instants and sorceries in our graveyard. And so being able to sack this and play one of those is going to come in really handy. All right, now we have a room card. This is from Duskmourn. It's Meat Locker and Drowned Diner. So the Meat Locker side is 2 and a blue, and it says whenever you unlock this door, tap up to 1 target creature and put 2 stun counters on it. So you get to stun something for 2 turns. So this is going to slow down an opponent. But really we have this in here for the other side, which is Drowned Diner. It's 3 and 2 blue pips. It says whenever you unlock this door, draw 3 cards, then discard a card. So this is going to net us 2 cards and allow us to discard something from our hand that is a recursion target. And that's really what it's in this deck for, but both sides are good. It's just we're looking at more of the Drowned Diner side, and that's kind of how these rooms go, is just added value on the other side. Usually you're just targeting one side, but basically a room, the way it works is that you pay one or the other cost, it sticks on the battlefield, and then you can pay the other cost to unlock the room, which basically is casting the other side. Now we have Mardu Outrider. This is 1 and 2 blacks. So this is going to do 2 things because it says as an additional cost to cast this spell, discard a card. It's just a 5/5. But as a manifest target, this is awesome. You pay 3 mana for a 5/5. Overstated, just big beater. However, you can actually play this from your hand. Let's say you have Valgavoth Terror Eater in your hand. Play this, you discard Valgavoth, and then you get a 5/5. So this is going to be a dual threat in this deck. All right, now we have an older card. This is Urza's Guilt. It's 2, a blue and a black, and it says each player draws 2 cards, then discards 3 from his or her hand. So you're going to go down a card, then loses 4 life. This is just a great design on an older card. I'm not even sure what set this is from, but the fact is you get to draw 2 cards and then discard exactly what you want, whereas your opponents are going to have some really tough choices. But again, you're giving them 2 cards. So this should lighten the hit as to basically having discard because they did get to draw. So next up we have Rankle's Prank. This is 2 and 2 blacks. You can choose 1 or more. Each player discards 2 cards. Again, it targets you. Each player loses 4 life, and each player sacrifices 2 creatures. So this is kind of a pseudo board wipe in some ways if you play it on turn 4. But also it allows us to get stuff out of our hand, and it's going to force your opponents to get stuff out of their hand. So at least it hits everybody equally. I don't know, I think at some point you start playing this and your opponents are going to figure out what you're doing. But overall, I think it's more fair for you to discard if you're making your opponents discard. If I was going to do a discard theme like this is how I would do it. So, all right, that is the end there. Let's move on to the first ninja today is Yuriko, the Tiger Shadow. This is a great ninja commander. It's 1, a blue and a black. It's got commander, ninjitsu, blue, black. So basically you can return an unblocked attacker you control, put this card on the battlefield from your hand, or the command zone, tap and attacking. That's why it's got the commander and ninjitsu. I would not run this in as the commander for this deck, mostly because, well, this is a salty commander. This is a very high-powered deck. I guess in the right situation, if you're playing up to somebody's level, you could swap this out. So I guess technically there's 3 possible commanders for this deck, because there are a lot of ninjas. Whenever a ninja you control deals combat damage to a player, reveal the top card of your library, put that card to your hand. Each opponent loses life equal to that card's mana value. So there's not any giant beaters. There's not anything that's like 10, 11, 12, or 13 mana, because like I've seen this deck and they'll run a lot of that stuff. So it's not perfectly optimized for this, but it could still be really good. All right, now we have a new card and probably the inspiration for this deck. Kaido, Bane of Nightmares. It's 2 blue black from Duskmourn. It's a legendary planeswalker Kaido. It's got ninjitsu, 1 blue black. And it says, during your turn, as long as Kaido has 1 or more loyalty counters on him, he's a 3/4 ninja creature and has hexproof. This is an awesome card, and basically I wanted to build a ninja sort of deck. This can't be the commander, but this was the first card in this deck, and so Satoru, because in standard he's the only one that's legal, so I actually have a standard deck about this. If that's something you guys are interested in seeing some arena footage of my standard decks, let me know. I did try to do that a while back, and there wasn't a lot of demand for that kind of content. But if you guys would let me know in the comments, you know, that if that's something you want to see, because I have a really cool deck with this guy and Satoru. Again, the inspiration for this commander deck. But Kaido is awesome. His abilities are, you get an emblem with ninjas you control, get +1/+1. So if you get this on the board, every ninja for the rest of the game is going to get a buff. So if you can activate this multiple times, you are actually going to have really big ninjas every time you play him, because it's an emblem and it doesn't go away. Even after you remove him, that emblem remains. But I really love the 0 here. It's a surveil 2, then draw a card for each opponent who lost life this turn. Well, if you're doing ninjitsu, you're unblocked, so you're getting the damage, and then you're going to be able to surveil 2 and then draw a card. So you can look at those 2, and if you don't like either of them, you pitch them both, and then you get the next card, or you know, you can put one back on top that you actually want to have in your hand. The -2 here is not bad either. It says tap target creature, put 2 stun counters on it. So again, if they have something on the board you can't deal with at the moment, you can stun them up, and then it gives yourself a turn to try and find an answer. So a couple turns to find an answer, really. All right, now we have Throat Seeker. This is 2 and a black for an anthem that just says unblack, attacking ninjas you control have lifelink. This is just going to give you some survivability, and because we're doing ninjitsu stuff, you know, hopefully we're getting some ninjas through and we're going to gain some life back, because people are going to be trying to swing at you, especially when you start making them discard cards. All right, now we have Prosperous Thief. This is 2 and a blue, or Ninjitsu 1 and a blue. Whenever one or more ninjas or rogue creatures you control deal combat damage to player, create a treasure token. So this is just a little bit of ramp. Now we have Fallen Shinobi. It's 3 blue, black, or Ninjitsu 2 blue, black. Whenever Fallen Shinobi deals combat damage, that player exiles the top 2 cards of their library until end of turn. You may play those cards without paying their mana cost. So if it's a creature, Satoru, guess what, is going to trigger when you play one of those and draw you a card. So there's some extra value there. And then obviously the Ninjitsu trigger is going to trigger Satoru as well. All right, now we have Silent Blade Oni. This is 3, 2 blue, 2 black, very expensive, or Ninjitsu 4 blue, black, still 6. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, look at that player's hand. You may cast a spell from among those cards without paying its mana cost. This is a crazy ability, and 7 is a lot, 6 is a lot, but you are getting a lot back for it. So especially with the Ninjitsu, you're guaranteed to hit and steal something from your opponent. Hopefully it's something like Omniscience or something crazy that you're going to be able to steal. That's just a high cost spell that is going to win you the game. That is it for the ninjas section. Let's take a look at Recursion. So as you guys know, I really like graveyard recursions. I'm going through a phase. What can I say? I love doing graveyard stuff right now, and probably why I made this deck. However, I always try to feature different cards, and this deck is no different. Let's take a look at the first one, Coiling Rebirth. This is 3 and 2 blacks. This is a Bloomburrow card. You can gift a card, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Then if the gift was promised and that creature isn't legendary, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's a 1/1, basically giving it offspring. So Abhorrent Oculus and Rottenmouth Viper are 2 examples where if you offspring those, you give a card to your opponent. Oh my goodness. Like, dude, that's going to go off. Like, basically forcing them to either lose 8 life or discard 2 cards or sack 2 things. Like, that's awesome. Abhorrent Oculus, at the beginning of everybody's upkeep, you're going to, instead of manifest Dread once, you manifest Dread twice. Whew. This is an awesome recursion piece for this deck, and one I'm really excited to feature here. Next up, we have Ghastly Conscription. This is 5 and 2 blacks. Exile all creature cards from target player's graveyard in a face-down pile. Shuffle that pile, then manifest those cards. So you're probably only going to get 1 trigger because all those manifested cards come into play at the same time. However, just getting all of your opponent's creatures and being able to flip them, you know, slowly over time. Wow, man, this card's awesome. Next up, we have Ancient Brass Dragon. This is 5 and 2 black pips, flying 7/6. This is a great recursion target or a manifest target, and it says whenever it deals combat damage, you roll a d20. When you do, any number of target creature cards with total mana value X or less from your graveyard onto the battlefield under your control, where X is the result. So I mean, if you roll a 20 here, 20 mana worth of creatures, you're going to get a bunch of stuff back. This isn't probably as good as Living Death or some of the other stuff, but just a fun card. And I like it because we're doing the manifest thing, and also it's a recurable target. And it's just, you know, flying 7/6. So great card overall. Not the best dragon from this set, but still a awesome dragon. I love dragons. It's a cool card. Next up, we have a new Duskmourn card, Metamorphosis Fanatic, 4 and 2 blacks, lifelink 4/4. When it enters, return up to 1 target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a lifelink counter on it. I actually think for 6, that's not bad. Typically, to recur something from your graveyard to the battlefield, on average, costs about 5. So an additional 1 mana, you're getting not only a lifelink 4/4, but you're putting a lifelink counter on a creature. That's not bad. But the fact that you can miracle this, so if this is the first card you draw each turn, you can pay 2 to get this. Like, that's bonkers. That's crazy value if you can miracle this. Next up, we have Ink Eyes, Servant of Oni, 4 and 2 black pips, Ninjitsu, 3 and 2 black pips. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may put target card from that player's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. Pay 2 to regenerate Ink Eyes. So basically, you can attack somebody, Ninjitsu, and then steal something from their graveyard. And I love that this has got the regenerate on it. An awesome value card for this deck. That's the end of the recursion. Let's get into our last category, everything else. Everything else. So this is the category where you feature cards that don't fit into other categories, except there's one card for Manifest because, well, we already recorded Manifest, and yeah, this was in the wrong category, so I shoved it in here. But anyway, let's get into it. First card, Calidus Assassin. This is a 4 blue-black for a human shapeshifter assassin. It's a 3/3 with flash. You may have it enter the battlefield tapped as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except it has, when this creature enters, destroy up to one other target creature with the same name as this creature. So you're going to copy your opponent's creature, and then in return, when it comes into the battlefield, you destroy that creature. So it's almost like taking control of it in a way. I think for the CMC, this is actually really fair because for 4 mana, you get the clone, and then for 2 more, you're getting the removal. So works really well, and a really interesting take on a clone. All right, now we have Memory Vampire. This is 4 blue-black for a vampire detective from the clue set that nobody bought. It's a 4/4 flying. Whenever Memory Vampire deals combat damage to a player, any number of target players each mill that many cards. Then you may collect Evidence 9. When you do, you may cast target non-land card from defending player's graveyard without paying its mana costs. So what does this mean? This means you're going to attack and everyone's going to mill 4 cards, and then you're able to remove stuff from your graveyard to play something in theirs. This is a really cool and interesting card, and like I said, nobody really bought this, or very few people bought the clue set, so one that is probably not seeing a lot of play, but looks really interesting and fun. All right, now we have Dissection Tools. This is a 5 generic equipment. This is the card I was talking about before. When it enters, Manifest Dread, then attach this to that creature. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has Death Touch and Lifelink. Really cool. And then equip it, sacrifice a creature. If we're doing a lot of manifesting, you're probably going to manifest a land or something like that. So you could actually sacrifice that to equip this onto something else. The Death Touch Lifelink is really powerful, and it's going to allow you to basically grind out the game against other decks because you're going to be gaining life. So if you can get this on the board, it's going to be really good. All right, now we have Takeo, the Patient Avalanche. I think I said that right. 3 blue. For a Turtle Ninja, it's a 4/5, and when it enters tapped, and whenever another creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it didn't die, so Ninjitsu and some other things like blinking, but here we're talking about Ninjitsu, you can scry 1 and put a 1/1 counter on Takeo. Whenever Takeo attacks, you may pay a hybrid blue-black. When you do, a target attacking creature can't be blocked this turn. So I really like that because it can ensure that your ninjas are getting through and that you can do Ninjitsu and also get your triggers. So a really fun card and works great in this deck. And it hasn't been released yet. This is from Foundations, which will be coming out soon, but really fun one I wanted to feature here. All right, now we have Slickshot Lockpicker. This is 2 blue, and it's got plot 2 in a blue, so you're gonna wanna plot this because when it enters, target instant or sorcery card in your graveyard gains flashback until end of turn. The flashback cost is equal to its mana cost. So if you plot this, you're gonna have more mana to spend on that instant or sorcery. Otherwise, you better have a whole bunch of mana because I'm guessing you're probably want to cast something that's, I don't know, on average 4, let's say. So that would be 7. So you wouldn't even be able to use this until late game. However, you plot this and then play it. Now you've got 4 mana to do the next turn whatever you want with it. So, and also it would give you a card draw with Satoru. So yeah. All right, last but not least, we've got Jace Reawakened. This is 2 blue. You can't play it on your first, second, or third turn. It's got 3 loyalty abilities. It's got draw a card, then discard a card, which is going to work really well here. You may exile a non-land card with mana value 3 or less from your hand. If you do, it becomes plotted, so this allows you to plot something for free, which is going to give us card draw. And then finally, it's got until end of turn. Whenever you cast a spell, copy it. You may choose new targets for the copy. Really powerful, but doesn't get to go off very often. The first 2 are a ton of value, though, for this deck. All right, that's the end of the category and the end of this video. I appreciate you taking the time to check this out and watch it through to the end. If you could take a few moments and give me a like and a subscribe, give me a comment on what you thought of this video, and I will catch you in the next one.